Hello, I am Brett Etheridge, co-founder of Franchises for Fathers. Excited to talk today with Allan Alarcon of ResiBrands, co-founder of ResiBrands. Allan, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Brett. Appreciate you having me out here today on the call and just to talk a little bit about franchising.
Exactly. And I'm excited to talk about franchising in general. And specifically, I want to hear your story. I want to talk about franchising as an option for young adults who may be looking at going into business for themselves, maybe right out of high school, maybe right out of college. I know the working environment is changing big time.
Yeah.
Real quick, though, as an introduction, Allan is the co-founder of ResiBrands. ResiBrands is a franchise group that manages multiple different brands. And so Resi Brands is sort of an umbrella organization over Action Exteriors, Garage Up, Pink's Window Services, That One Painter, and Monty's Handyman Services. And so sort of right out of the gate, I guess it's probably like choosing your favorite kid. It's impossible to do, but do you have one of those brands that's sort of near and dear to your heart?
I mean, look, it's always probably going to be that one painter, only because that's our first brand. Resi doesn't happen without that one painter story. And so, if there's one brand that's kind of a catalyst to everything that we do, that one painter for sure. But I mean, obviously, I love all the brands. I love the franchisees we have in all the brands. I think they all kind of have their own little bit of an ethos and a culture, but while still kind of being a Resi brand, which is kind of harder to do than it actually sounds. But it's been a lot of fun. So yeah.
Good. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about Resi Brands and home services in general, but let's sort of dive in though with your story though, because you got right into business ownership, entrepreneurship right out of high school, right? Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial family?
Um, Kind of. I mean, I would say my dad, funny enough, so I'm half Mexican, half American. I was born in Mexico, and at the age of 3, we kind of moved here to the U.S. to Oregon, which is where my mom's family is originally from. And then eventually, well, as I got older, about 8 years old, my parents decided to move to Texas. But when we were in Mexico, and I didn't know this until honestly way later, but when we were in Mexico, my dad was actually the franchisee for Husqvarna and Home Elite. He had like 5 or 6 different locations down there where he sold basically like power equipment, chainsaws, things like that. And I had no clue that that was even something that my dad had done. So that was kind of funny. But no, growing up, my dad was more of a mechanic by trade. So he was in the trades. So I always grew up around machines and motors and cars and all that stuff. And then my mom was actually a few different things, but most of her career has been as a paralegal for an immigration office. And so, but my dad was definitely very like hands-on, very much like, a hands-on guy, made money with his hands. And so I kind of got to see that, although not really much as entrepreneurs, but they definitely kind of push that, sense of like making money with what you do with your hands kind of mentality. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started. And then I just, after watching my dad get laid off like 5 different times. Like it was just a crazy story where he'd go to one company and he was always the best employee. Everyone always loved him. And then that company would get bought out or it would get like, literally like happen time and time again. I just remember growing up thinking, I don't really want to do that. If I'm going to do something, I kind of want to build my own legacy and I don't want to be at the mercy of, because the whole thing that gets sold to you is that like the secure thing is to go work for some company out there. In my home growing up, that wasn't secure, right? It was my dad always getting laid off, then having to go find some other place to go work and all of that. And so, having lived through that, I just knew that I wanted to do something on my own. And my dad did always fix machines and make side money on the side, in the evenings or on the weekends. And so you can kind of say he had a side hustle. So I kind of got that energy from him, I think, for sure.
Did you work with him or what kind of jobs did you have in high school then?
Yeah, so I started working at 14. I lied on a construction site, told him I was 15, and got a job on a construction site moving limestone. I got paid $60 cash a day to just haul around limestone all day. It was brutal work, but saved up enough money that summer to buy my first car. And then, yeah, I kind of worked with him sometimes, but honestly, him and I didn't always see eye to eye. I'm not as mechanically inclined. I never was as good at, my dad can take apart a machine, put it back together without even like taking a picture. And he could never understand like why my brain couldn't get there. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that. And so I started working at a few different places in high school. I worked at a golf and tennis shop, like a pro store. And then I also worked, believe it or not, at an ice skating rink as well. I was a skate guard. My sister was a big figure skater, so I got hired there. But anyway, so I kind of had a lot of odds and ends jobs and stayed working all the way through high school for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever consider going to college, right? So part of your story is that, walk us through that. You're getting towards graduation. When did you know that you actually wanted to go into business for yourself? You talked about how you had watched your dad get hired and fired numerous times. There must have been that realization at some point that I want a little bit more agency over my life, a little bit more control, but that doesn't necessarily preclude going to college. So walk me through that thought process. When and how
Yeah.
did you get to the point where it's like, nope, I'm going to go straight into business ownership out of high school?
Didn't map out exactly like straight out of high school. It was after really 2 years of Bible college. So I did do I kind of did odds and ends things, kind of made money on the side doing different stuff for different people. I even worked like doing tree trimming and landscaping for a little bit to kind of pay for those 2 years of Bible college. But I knew that traditional college wasn't going to be right for me. I was always a student in high school that was probably too smart for my own good. Like I hated doing the busy work. I just thought it was like a bunch of crap. And so I would get in there and basically not do a lot of the assignments, then come ace the test. In fact, my senior year of high school, I found that you could test out of classes. And so my senior year of high school, I tested out of every class that I could, except for one elective. I literally went to one class every morning for 45 minutes, and I worked the whole rest of my, like, everything else was work. And so my traditional high school thing, when I was 17, I was already full-time working. And so I just had a different mindset. And I felt like a lot of the kids around me, like, they were still very young. They hadn't had any experience. They hadn't worked anywhere. They hadn't even, tried anything. And so, I always wanted to kind of not be a burden on my parents. My sister was going to college, and so they were paying for that. And that was very difficult on the family, as my parents were very much middle class. And so decided to go to Bible college. That was more of a spiritual thing. I really felt God pulling on my heart. I had a rebellious nature, and I wanted to go deal with that. And
Good
so
for
I did
you.
2 years of Bible college. Yeah. And that was a good time. And I really enjoyed that. I do feel like that gave me a character foundation that I was kind of needing and wanting. And truthfully, in that season, I thought I might do ministry. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do or what, God had for me. So then after those 2 years of Bible college is when I kind of got into more of an entrepreneurial mindset. I started working in car sales at Maxwell Ford. And that kind of opened up my eyes to like, oh gosh, I can learn to get good at sales. I can sell something. And even in car sales, I was making a lot more money than even some of my friends who had, the career jobs already at that age. And I said, okay, you know what? Like, here's a pathway for me to learn and go down. And then quickly got into home services doing pest control. And that's kind of where really that kind of all started.
Yeah. Well, connect those dots then, right? So you went to a couple years of Bible college, you're doing pest control, but you said that one painter holds a special place in your heart. When
Yeah.
did you move into home services, and how was ResiBrands born?
Yeah. That's great. So that one painter was started by my cousin Steven. He originally started it when him and I were roommates. It was kind of we actually both went to Bible college the same 2 years. And we both were like after Bible college, like, well, what do we do now, right? And so we both obviously wanted to get married. He got married. I got married 4 months after him. Kind of funny enough. So like our lives had a very similar kind of, and we've always been very close. So he actually started that one painter. He was doing like subcontract work, and he was like, you know what, I can probably do this, a little bit more, seriously. And he started thinking of names one day, and it was funny. Where all of our roommates were on a couch, and he was shooting off names, and we were like, "That's a dumb name. That's no good. Whatever." And we always liked that '70s show, and so he thought of that one painter and kind of came up with a name. I originally was like, "That's a really silly name, Steven. Everyone's gonna think you're a tiny little like one painter, like one guy. No one's gonna hire you for big jobs." Well, turns out I was wrong. So anyway, so he starts it and starts having success. And then shortly after that is when I got into pest control. I saw home services and that kind of deal. And I had a buddy of mine who was doing that and doing very well. So I started door knocking and making some good commission. It was all like 1099 type work. So I basically was self-employed at that point, and started getting a lot of sales and learning the hard way. I made a lot of mistakes early on. I wasn't a very good door knocker early on, but had some grit, pushed through. I saw guys making money. I figured I could get there eventually too. And yeah, that led me later on to about a couple years after that, start my own pest control business with a partner of mine. It actually still exists today. It's in Georgetown, Texas. So we started that, built that out, and all while this was going on, Stephen was building that one painter, and him and I were very in close communications, and very much talked all the time, shared resources, shared ideas. Hey, what's working for you? What's not working for you? What networking groups are good? Which ones are not? It was very much just learning through our inner circle, if you will. And then he got to a point where he grew it to where he called me up one day and was like, "Hey, I need to partner with somebody and kind of be the largest paint company and see what we do from there. Or I've got to start turning down business." And I was like, "Well, that's not an option. We're not going to start turning down business. If things are going that well, count me in." I was like, "I don't know much about paint, but I know you can help me out." So yeah, we literally talked on a Friday and I started with him on a Monday. And so I kind of walked away from the partnership that I had with my other partner amicably. I really prayed on it and felt after I had been doing that for about 2.5 years with him that it was the right move to just step away and let him kind of run it. Not really knowing. Honestly, I got a little bit of flack from the family. Even my wife was like, "Why? You've been there 2.5 years. Like, why do you want to just walk away from it?" I was like, "I learned my lessons, and I don't know how to describe it, but I just have a crazy amount of peace about moving right now, and I want to hitch myself to the right wagon." And that was definitely that one painter, and with my cousin Stephen Montgomery. And then him and I started partnering up together. We grew. We did about 1.5 million our first year together, 2.3 the second, 4.5 the third, and that's also the year we started franchising. And so it's all been kind of just growth from there, man.
So there's that much money in painting.
I mean, look, I think there's a huge misunderstanding of what home services really is. I mean, every property, whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, whether it's a law office, a dental office, I mean, where there's a wall, there's paint, and somebody's got to paint it. And so, once you build a good, reputable business and you have a lot of referral partners, yeah, there's a huge opportunity to do a good amount of revenue in any market across the country, for
Well,
sure.
let's talk about franchising then, business ownership in general, a little bit more then, right? Because
Yeah.
somebody listening to this, watching this, who's intrigued with this idea of business ownership, what should they be looking for? What should they be thinking about heading into making a decision about investing in a business, perhaps starting a business for themselves, perhaps? And just because we've talked about painting, I know I drive around town and it seems like I pass a million painting trucks on the road, it seems like, right? And so it would be easy for somebody to think, well, I can't really compete in that industry, or maybe that's not the right industry for me. What are some of the questions somebody should ask themselves if they're thinking about A, getting into business for themselves, and then B, what industry to get into?
Yeah. I think there's a few things. So one thing that when I was young, I didn't really understand, there's not as much value to having like a unique idea as people think. In fact, that's very risky. Like I used to think that like business meant that I came up with almost like that Shark Tank thing. Like I
Yeah,
developed this new
sure.
toilet plunger
Yeah.
thing or whatever, right? And then that thing blows up. The truth is that's very rare. Most people you meet in business, they invested and they built things in very predictable and in already established markets. It's a way safer way to go. If you're gonna try to come up with some new invention or some new thing, like that's not so easy. It's very risky. The market always changes. And so I think there's an idea for people who aren't in business that they think they have to have some new, unique, creative idea. The truth is you don't. And I think that's one thing. And then the other thing too is talking about like the market and why home services. I'll speak most to that. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of painting companies. There's a lot of handyman. There's a lot of garage door companies in any market. But what I don't think people understand is that at the end of the day, when you're going to build a business, you're going to have to take market share, right? And one thing that all Americans hate, and we even have laws against it, are monopolies, right? Why? Because it's an unfair advantage for those who own that much market share. In fact, we have laws against it. So what people don't understand is that actually the more fragmented a category, the easier it is for you to break in. And so the fact that you're seeing that many painting vehicles, the fact you're seeing that many garage door companies or handyman businesses or window cleaning companies, whatever it is actually a really good sign that you have an easier way of grabbing your market share because it's not as consolidated. In fact, if you wanted to start a business where you basically have three main players that dominate the entire industry or that entire category, it's really, really, really hard to break in. It can cost a lot of money, and there's no guarantees, and they have a lot more buying power to kind of push you out. And so it's because home services are more fragmented, actually, even though it doesn't necessarily seem intuitive, it actually makes it easier to break into home services than it is other types of business.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I was actually having a conversation with a friend who's looking to start a business, and she was looking for more of like a home remodeling type of a concept. And we were just talking about how even if you can just pick up the phone and provide good customer service, and you say you're going to be there at a certain time to give a quote, and you actually show up at a certain time to give a quote, or whatever it is, you can differentiate yourself because of the fragmentation you're talking about. It so she was just lamenting how frustrating it was, even just getting a good, reliable person to actually show up and do what they say they were going to do and return your phone call. And so you provide that customer service, you act with integrity, man, you can definitely take some of that market share that you're talking about. And franchising can help with that. It can. I like to think about franchises as sort of accelerating the path to profitability. So let's talk about that a little bit as well. If somebody's looking to get into business for themselves, you can definitely go start knocking on doors with your paint can and paintbrush that you got from the big box store, or you can hitch your wagon to a franchise concept like you have at ResiBrands. What are the pros and cons of each? When you talk to people about the value of franchising, talk to me about some of the advantages perhaps of somebody going the franchise route as opposed to trying to figure it out and do it themselves.
Yeah. Like I worked really hard in my 20s, man, like really, really hard. A lot of my friends were like, some dead end coffee barista or whatever, like just, or working at some bar or something. And we were grinding, me and Steven, and one thing that I look back on is like, man, I wish I had started a franchise younger. I really do, because the lessons it took me a decade to learn in a franchise system, I could have learned in months. And it would have put me ahead, and I would have had basically business coaching baked into the recipe, right? I had to go search for those things. I had to go find mentors, and that's easier said than done. And I had to make a lot of mistakes. I hit my head a lot of times, literally and allegorically. So I really can't say enough that like the franchise model, it's an accelerant. It's not for everyone. It isn't, because if you are a true like entrepreneur, visionary, I have a unique idea and I've got to go build it. Franchising is not really for you, because you should go do that thing. That's the only thing that's probably going to make you feel, whole. Thank God we have some of the people, the Elon Musk of the world who say, I'm going to go create a category where there isn't one. Thank God that exists. But that's franchising is really for the people who want to be entrepreneurs. They know they can learn how to be a good operator, but maybe they don't have that unique concept, that unique idea. They really want to be supported and coached and kind of accelerate that growth trajectory or that success rate, which is what's proven in franchising. The truth is that entrepreneurism is risky. Being an entrepreneur, a lot of people do fail at business, but the statistics show that within a franchise model, you are a lot more likely to be successful, especially long term, than you are outside of one. And so those are the things that I've learned to love about it. And I know when I started business, I had no coaching. I had no one telling me, "Hey, Alan, that's a really dumb way to spend your marketing investment, right?" Or that's really not a good way to manage your team. Or here's some vendors that you can use to get you good pricing. Stuff like that. Like having all of those things already set up, it's just every single day there's an opportunity to maximize the growth of your business inside of a franchise model, because you can kind of use all the leverages and all the different things that franchise model has done to make it easy for you to accelerate your growth in a good model. And I want to be clear, they're not all franchises are built equal. People should do their due diligence, really vet them. Obviously, like anything, there's good and there's bad. You want to make sure that you really check through all the things they offer, and talk to other franchisees within that model to make sure that they like the support, the training, and everything that they're getting.
Yeah. So a franchise concept can provide a lot of the training and support, take some of the guesswork out. You can just tap right into all of the lessons learned from over a decade from Allan. Um, but it's gonna take work, just because you're aligning yourself with a franchise and opening a franchise business, as opposed to bootstrapping your way, DIY type of a business startup concept. It's still going to require work. What have
100%.
you seen to be some of the characteristics of people who are successful in building businesses in a franchise framework?
Yeah. The biggest ones for me is like a coachability. Like, are you a coachable person? Do people describe you as coachable? Like, do you lack humility? Are you kind of stubborn? Do you ask for advice and never take it? Probably gonna struggle in any franchise concept. And the second one is grit. Business ownership takes grit. You're gonna run on a razor's edge, and many times in your entrepreneurial journey, you're gonna have moments where you're fighting to make collections, to make that payroll on that. Everyone's had those moments. I don't know anyone who's a business owner who hasn't had like these razor's edge moments. And so if you can't deal with that, if you can't, step up and really be the hero of the day and make it happen, you're not gonna make it, man. Entrepreneurism, it's a blessing. It's a really cool thing, but it's also gonna challenge you, almost like nothing else will. So it's fun, but it's also a roller coaster. And if you can't deal with the ups and downs, you're gonna want to get off the ride real quick.
Well, but talk about the flip side of that, though. What blessings does business ownership provide? What has it provided you and your family, other people in your franchise orbit, creating successful businesses with Resi Brands? Talk about those, some of the potential benefits of business ownership, perhaps in contrast to traditional W-2 types of employment opportunities that people might be weighing against.
Yeah, that's a good one, Brett. So, understanding the audience this is going to go to, I would say if you're in high school and you're wondering like, hey, how should I think about being an entrepreneur or business owner? Either way, in America, you're going to work. And you're either going to work to exchange for an income, or you're going to work to exchange for building wealth. The thing about being a business owner is that your labor is in exchange at a company. When you go get a job, your labor is just in exchange for a paycheck. You're not more valuable. You don't have an asset you own. You're not increasing your family or your generation's wealth. If you're going to work anyways, you might as well work for yourself, build a business, and then build actual wealth. Because the reality is, most people who are wealthy in this country built it through business ownership, not through like investing in some land or some real estate property. And by the way, where are you going to get $300,000 to invest in that real estate property, anyways? Like, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. You have to be able to generate $300,000 of actual wealth to then be able to go start making those kinds of investments. Real estate's great. It doesn't really build wealth, it sustains it, right? And so there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of people on social media talking about all these different things. The reality is that business ownership is the best way to build wealth. And what do you get other than that? Well, other than just exchanging your labor, not just for an income, a paycheck, but exchanging it for building a wealth and legacy, the other thing is you get freedom, man. Like, I get to choose my coworkers on who I hire and fire, right? Like, if I don't want to work with someone, I don't have to, right? Um, I get to determine my income. At the end of the day, like, if I want to pay myself more, I just have to make sure that business is more profitable. I can make a few adjustments here and there, and I can make more money this year. I don't have to go ask my boss for a raise. I can determine this year I'm going to make a few adjustments, and I'm giving myself a raise, right? And then freedom. Once my business is established and all that, I mean, if I want to I do this every year. I take a whole entire month off and I go to Mexico, and I've done that for like the last 5, 6 years. And I, rent somewhere on the beach and just spend a great time with my wife and my boys. I got 3 boys, and so it's a good time for me to kind of reset. A lot of my best ideas come while I'm away for a little bit, but I've done that every year now for about 5, 6 years, and it's one of the best things. And I don't have to worry about it. I know I have a business and I have people I can count on who are running it while I'm not here. And so, it's just about having that freedom. That ultimately is what it comes down to.
Yeah. I love that. I love that vision. How old's your oldest?
My oldest is 12.
Are they
And
good? Do you already have them working in the business? 12, it's getting close, right? Are you,
he comes to meetings sometimes. Like
yeah.
I fill him in. Like I try to make sure that he's around. I try to let him know, like, look, it's important. When I was 12, I would have loved to have been exposed to some of this stuff. So yeah, and he has a curiosity for sure. Like he's always asking me questions. He wants to know a little bit more about it. And yeah, I already told him when he turns 14, I'm gonna go put him to work on a paint crew because I
Yeah,
was like,
well,
nothing matters if you don't have work ethic.
yeah, you got to build the work ethic, and then from a financial standpoint, some nice extra tax savings for your family. And getting your kids working in the business a little bit.
For sure.
But no, the work ethic is absolutely huge. So, so thinking about you started working, you had the grit you're talking about, you were willing to work in your early 20s, you were already going down the path towards business ownership. Let's talk logistics a little bit. Somebody watching this, maybe they're in their late teens, early 20s, and you're vetting somebody at ResiBrands, you're deciding, hey, is this somebody I want to bring on board to ResiBrands and sort of hand over the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, as a franchisee? I like this person. I want to trust them to operate a franchise business
Yeah.
with ResiBrands. What's the calculus there? What are you looking for? And does an 18-year-old, 17, 18-year-old, even an early 20-year-old have the skills and financial resources maybe to be awarded a franchise? Are you looking at the parents? Are you looking at an investor? How does somebody in their 18, 19, 20, you talk about the razor's edge, and do they have the grit to be able to withstand that type of thing? Or do they need to sort of be brought along, and maybe they work in the business first, they're managing teams within the business, and then eventually they're actually the owner of the business? Based on what you've seen in ResiBrands, or even just sort of theoretically, talk about sort of the logistics of how somebody can move into franchise ownership pretty quickly right out of high school.
Yeah. I think I'll speak one to parents. So one, if you're a parent, I would say, look, we all look at our children with rose-colored, lenses, right? And so I think you're going to have to figure out how to be honest about the skill sets that your kid and the character that your kid does and doesn't have. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to put them in a difficult situation before you put them into business ownership. Go make them get a job somewhere that they probably don't like. Push their limits. So in any home service trade, you're going to have sales and you're going to have service. You're going to have both, right? And so whatever area you think your kid might struggle in a little bit more, go make them work in that for like a 6-month period and go make them get some grit. Even if they're in high school, go make them pick up a sales job, doing anything. If you do sales, anyone will hire you. I mean, sales is always hiring, right? So, and so I think that's a really good way to kind of see what your kid is willing to do and bring to the table. And I think as a parent, you have to be aware of that. And then honestly, too, like look at yourself as a parent. Because if you have a W-2 and you're very, very time consumed there, the reality is your kid's going to need a mentor, and obviously they have the franchise system to lean on. So will the parent, but I think it's also important that the child can lean on you as the parent as a mentor as well. And so figuring those things out in that type of scenario, but it all, we have some franchisees who parents aren't so much in the picture, right? And so they're 18, 20 years old, but they just have this dream. And so everyone has a different, everybody's story and everyone's journey is slightly different. And so what we try to do in the franchise validation process is to really figure out where they're coming from and then try to build a framework that can succeed with where they're at, kind of meet people where they are. Because even though the system doesn't change, people's starting point kind of does, right? And so we try to always match the system to that starting point and figure out if it's a good fit. And like I said before, frankly, it isn't a good fit for everybody. And there are people that we go through the process and say, hey, you know what? It might be a little bit too early right now. You might be better off doing this or doing that and then come back to it, right? And so we kind of try to help be as honest as we can because obviously we're incentivized to bring the best franchisees into our brands as we can. That's our goal here at Resi. But I think that's one. And then if you're an 18, 20-year-old, whatever, you're looking and you're kind of looking at the price of admissions right now and, dorms and everything else and going, holy cow, this is a huge investment. And what am I going to get in return for that? Bet on yourself. Here's my honest opinion. If you're going to go study business, just go start a franchise. Like you'll learn more, you'll get a better education about business and be more valuable to any business if you do that than if you actually go study business. I'm just being honest. I didn't study business, but I now have to sit, I sit in front of people with all sorts of degrees now, talk about investing, raising capital, all sorts of stuff, right? And it's funny because like I don't have a formal business degree, neither does Steven, but it's all been trial and error. It's been through experience, and we've hired people with business degrees from very affluent colleges. And frankly, Brett, I'm not trying to be harsh. Most of them have been pretty useless to us.
Yeah,
And I'm just being honest
I hear that a
because
lot.
they have a lot of book knowledge, but they don't
Yeah,
actually know how to do anything in business.
yeah,
My dad always taught me that if you wanted to be valuable, add value to someone's day, right? And so I always came to work saying, how can I add value? How can I add value? I'm not going to wait around for the company to view me as valuable. I'm going to go be valuable every day, and then they're going to recognize me, right? And so it's just kind of a different flip mindset. And if you're a go-getter, you're an entrepreneur, college isn't really your thing. You have this like urge to hustle. Yeah, I mean, I think a franchise system can educate you, if not the same, at least a lot more than a lot of, depending on what you're going to study. I mean, thank God there's doctors, engineers, and all of that. And if that's you, please go do that because I need someone to check me up on my next visit, right? But if that's not you and you're not so clear, you don't know really what you want. I really do think that business ownership at a young age is a really powerful agent of education and success.
yeah. That's
So,
a really good point. My brother's a lawyer, my dad's a lawyer, and I've got tons of friends who went to law school after college, and they all say you go to 3 years of law school, and then when you get your first job is when you actually learn how to be a lawyer. Well, it's like you don't actually learn anything in law school. It's when you're actually in the weeds working that you actually learn. Law's a little bit different because you actually need the piece of paper.
yeah.
There are laws around that. You can't be representing somebody if you don't have a degree, if you haven't passed the bar, and all those types of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Business is different. You can just start working a business. You can start building a business
Oh, yeah.
and learning on the ground without the spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for the piece of paper like you're talking about. And I think that's really brilliant insight. And franchise concepts provide you a lot of that education in their systems as well.
Absolutely.
So you're getting the education. You have to learn how to do some stuff, but might as well be paid while you're learning.
You
Yeah, no,
got
I
that.
love that. Do you have examples of maybe fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, families working together in ResiBrands, or young
Yeah.
entrepreneurs having success in ResiBrands?
We have a ton, man. One of our most successful That One painters started with us, Dylan Walker, at 23 years old, is when he started. He's now 25, and he now has three locations. He runs East Texas, Shreveport, and Texarkana, and absolutely crushing. Has a massive team. He probably has like six sales guys underneath him right now, and has really just grown in leadership. His family's grown. He's got another little boy now, and it's just a really cool story to see someone that young step in. And he really did it on his own. His parents are kind of in his life, but not so much. And he started working. He was an actual painter for a while, which, funny enough, hardly any of our franchisees ever did paint beforehand. So he's kind of an anomaly there. But he just worked on different crews and had a work ethic. And yeah, we have plenty of others where it's like parents and children kind of working together. We have franchisees in Pinks who are doing that, where the kids are like the lead window tech of a van, learning the process, learning how to do it while the parents kind of run the business, or there's maybe a sales manager who's running it while the parents keep their W-2. Like we have the Moe family in New Jersey that are in Pinks. That's what they're doing with their son. They kind of are running back end. And then their son is the one who's kind of, the main window tech, and he's, super young, probably like 19, maybe 20, but really wanted to be a business owner. And so they're kind of grooming him towards that. Even in That One painter, we have plenty, like the Omaha, Nebraska team. Joe Domenico works with his son Jake, and Joe's kind of the manager, if you will, and then Jake's kind of one of the sales guys. And so, kind of learning and growing their way together. Obviously, Joe and Jake's goal is that eventually Jake gets good enough at all of this to, start taking over more and more. And so, because business ownership is a journey, and that's what you have to embrace. Even in a franchise system, you have to grow, and you're going to have different strengths and weaknesses, and we all can only grow at a certain pace. But it definitely is a story that we see time and time again. I have many examples. I have a lot more than even the ones I mentioned. But yeah, I mean, at Resi, we're very pro young entrepreneurs. It's something that, in fact, we're one of the only systems out there that gives a discount to anyone under 30. And so it's a big deal to us. It's something that we want to do to kind of give back and to really promote what I think is the American dream. I don't think the American dream is just owning a home. I think it's freedom. And I believe that the best outlet for freedom for any family is to stop working for a paycheck and start working for building wealth.
Man, I love that. Well, I think that's a good place to sort of wrap up this conversation. Maybe just two questions in parting. Maybe you can touch a little bit, though, on timing. Everybody's aware of the current economic environment, but I love what you just said, that entrepreneurship and business ownership's a journey, right? Regardless of what's going on today, it's a business. If somebody starts it and invests in it, they want it to be successful 10 years from now, right? And so there's always economic cycles over the course of any sort of business that you might own. But talk maybe a little bit more about home services and the current timing and the current environment, and maybe why home services and now is actually the right time.
Yeah. So if you're gonna jump in entrepreneurism, you're gonna go through recessions. That's just a proven, like, no one who's in business long enough doesn't go through a recession, at least maybe even a few. The whole COVID pandemic was a wild time, but it actually ended up proving to be very good for home services. It ended up being one of our biggest years in home services because people, guess what? We're stuck at home staring at ugly walls, going, hey, I'd really like to do something. So I've been putting off this project. Now's the time. And so, you never really know how, every recession is going to hit, what areas get hit more than others. But I do love that home services, at the end of the day, people's homes are some of their greatest assets that they own. And so we're very incentivized to make sure that our homes are upkept, that they look nice, that they have a high resale value. And that's never going away. Even in a downturn economy, people are going to still take care of their greatest asset. They may not splurge and get the upgraded rims on the car, or they may not go buy the Gucci bags or things that don't really protect an asset. But at the end of the day, most Americans understand the value of their home because they're paying that mortgage, and they know, that they want to make sure that that home stays valuable. So people are always willing to do, at minimum, general maintenance and upkeep and all of that. And so even in a downturn economy, it isn't like business goes to zero. It's just we might have to dial some knobs. We might have to make a little bit of internal structural changes to make sure that we can withstand those things. But I would say, from an investment standpoint, I do think that in the downturns is a good time to invest because you're kind of starting when no one else is. And you probably have a lot of your competition, maybe, not pushing as hard in marketing. So it kind of creates a gap where you can kind of step in. Maybe they took the foot off the gas a little bit. So it kind of enables you to come in and take market share. It kind of goes back to Warren Buffett, buy when others are selling and then sell when others are buying. And so you kind of, if you do the opposite of the market trend, that's honestly one of the greatest ways to get ahead.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insight. Any parting thoughts? I mean, thinking back to where you were in the shoes of the people watching this at one point, right? Trying to figure out what's next. I know you already said, man, I wish I'd known about franchising when I was bootstrapping my way and bumping my head against the wall and trying to figure it all out on my own. But any other parting thoughts, any other final advice for anybody sort of watching this, wondering what's next for them and considering business ownership and maybe specifically franchising as an option for themselves?
Yeah. Like, where are you at today is a very important thing to evaluate. So get with people that can mentor you, be honest with you, be super just upfront. Like, where am I today? What are my strengths and weaknesses? What am I? Because being self-aware is not real. Like, we only become aware when other people allow it, have the freedom to speak into our lives. So find out where you are today and then map out where you want to go. Where do I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And then that gap is called potential. And then make sure you get into the right vehicle and have the right mentors so that you can fulfill and meet your potential in life. And the truth is, a lot of people act like you have like your 20s to figure things out. No, you don't. You need to work harder than you've ever worked in your life in your 20s. And you need to be unapologetically, passionately pursuing your dreams in your 20s. If you want to make it and if you want to make an impact and leave a legend, if you waste your 20s, you will regret it. And so find out from people where you're at, determine where you want to be. That gap is called potential. Find the right mentors, find the right vehicle so that you can meet that potential. That'd be my advice to any young person watching this.
Well, thank you again. We can help you on that journey. Absolutely. Reach out to us at franchisesforfathers.com. Book an introductory 15-minute call. We can introduce you to Allan. You can obviously go to their website as well to learn more about their brands or any brand or industry that may interest you in business ownership and franchising. So lots of links below. Thank you again, Allan, for your time. And we will talk with you all again soon at Franchises for Fathers. Take care, everyone.